Hi, welcome. I'm Camia Lohman, and we're excited you're joining this webinar because that means you're interested in helping our pollinators. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll learn more about our local Houston pollinators and ways that you can help. This webinar is being sponsored by Urban Harvest, an awesome nonprofit in Houston that builds gardens in schools and communities, and they have a really good Saturday farmers market. So beneficial insects in the garden. We call them pollinators, poopers, and predators, which the students always think is really funny. A little pollinators 101. If you eat fruit, drink coffee, love flowers, or love chocolate, you are relying on pollinators. 90% of flowering plants on Earth rely on pollinators to reproduce. 75% of our crops and 35% of the food we eat depends on these pollinators. This picture over here is Bombus pennsylvanicus, or the American bumblebee. And this is the only bumblebee known to natively live in Houston. So she's a true local. Our other pollinators are different types of bee species, which we'll talk about in a second. Butterflies, moths, hummingbirds, flies can be pollinators, beetles, bats, wasps, ants, true bugs, and even mosquitoes are pollinators. So our native bees are different than honeybees. Honeybees are actually native to Europe. They were brought over on ships by European settlers who brought them over because they make honey. But they are not native to the area, so they did not evolve with the plants here. They actually aren't able to pollinate tomato and eggplant flowers, whereas native bees can pollinate a lot of our crops. Texas is home to 1,100 species of native bees, and they range in size from very big. You've seen some of the carpenter bees that are as big as a piece of popcorn, all the way down to little tiny bees that you might think are just gnats landing on flowers, but they're actually bees. So research was done. This research was done by Danielle Belot, that these extra large bees can fly up to 1,000 meters. Your large bees, only 700 meters. Medium bees, about the size of a honeybee, can fly up to 550 meters. Small bees, 450 meters, and extra small bees can only fly 250 meters. So what that tells us is that if we want these bees to be able to move throughout our city, this is how close together the gardens need to be for them to be able to have stepping stones, so to speak, as they move across the city. If you would like to learn more about the bees in your backyard, there's a very simple visual guide on my website, www.houstonnativebees.org, and you can use that to see what you might have in your own backyard. Insects are not just important because they're pollinators, they can also be predators that naturally take care of the pests in your garden for you. Examples are wasps, lady beetles or ladybugs, spiders, dragonflies and damselflies, praying mantises, lacewings, assassin bugs, ambush bugs, long-legged flies, robber flies, hover flies, also called syrphid flies, and also some things in the garden that aren't insects, such as reptiles, amphibians, birds, and bats, are all working to eat, and they're eating our pests for us. Insects in general, worldwide, are having a huge decline in their populations. This is due to loss of their habitat, forage, that means their food that they eat, dispersal challenges, they're not able to spread from one area to another because it's being broken up. Also, pesticide use increased dramatically in the 1990s. In fact, on this chart here from the Xerces Society, you see in the 90s, there's a sharp decline in the monarch butterfly population, and that's due to the increased use of neonicotinoids, which is a pesticide. Also, disease is believed to drop the numbers of insects. So how can we help insects and also use them to help our own garden? So we're going to introduce a concept here called an insectary. An insectary is the opposite of a garden that doesn't want insects. It is a garden that attracts them on purpose in order to take care of your own pests naturally. So the ways to do that, it's pretty easy. First of all, eliminate pesticide use and support nurseries that guarantee plants that are not grown with pesticides. And with your vegetables, grow plants that are going to flower and provide food and attract these beneficial insects. The more diversity that you have in the garden, the more diversity you are going to get in your insects that visit it. If you want to learn more about the beneficial insects in a garden, the Xerxes Society has a great publication that can help you identify these insects with pictures and descriptions, and the link is right here. All right, so this is one way that you can set up an insectary in a vegetable garden. This is a vegetable garden that I installed in an elementary school. They wanted 8 beds of vegetables that could be rotated. And so I helped them figure out which plants, which companion plants could be planted with the vegetables that would help attract the predators specific to the pests of that vegetable. And what that creates is a natural pest control. Those insect predators have evolved for millions of years to target and eradicate these pests. Also, these companion plants that I'm going to show you on the next slide can also release chemicals from their roots that are both insecticidal and fungicidal. And it's overall going to create a richer soil. Sometimes they might fix nitrogen in their roots, especially in the legume family. And also when these insects die or and they decompose, they add nitrogen to the soil, and earthworms also add nutrients to the soil. This is going to give you higher yields in your garden, and it's going to support the entire food chain. So companion plants help in one of 2 ways. Either they're going to attract beneficial predators to your garden to help eat the pests off of your vegetables, or they're going to serve as a trap crop, also called a sacrificial crop. What that means is those pests are going to want to go and eat them instead of your tomatoes or your vegetables you're trying to grow. I'm not going to read through all of these. I'll give you a chance to pause this and read through them if you want. But for example, borage is a companion plant that I always grow with my tomatoes because it's going to attract predators that are uniquely eat tomato hornworms, also cabbage worms, snails, and slugs. All right, so we talked about how to attract pollinators and insects to your vegetable garden. What about your yard in general? Landscaping for pollinators is a wonderful way to attract those beneficial insects to your yard. In order to do that, you want to choose plants that are going to bloom throughout every season. That way they have food year-round. It's the year-round buffet is what we like to call it. And plant a variety of flower shapes and sizes. They could be very small shapes like this lissome here, and that's going to attract very small bees. Or it could be very large or larger trumpet shapes that will attract larger pollinators. And having diversity in your plants will attract a diversity of pollinators. Also choose diverse colors. Bees are attracted to more of the white, purple, blue colored flowers, and hummingbirds are attracted to more of the oranges and red, which is why hummingbird feeders are red. Choose native plants. They're better adapted for our local soil, our gumbo, so to speak, and it's going to feed our local insects better. It also saves water. And avoid modern hybrids. When they add more petals, it takes away the stamens, which takes away the pollen that's available as food for the insects. And again, don't use pesticides. You'll want to have your plants in at least a 15 square foot area, and that's simply so that they're able to see it. When they're flying by, there's enough flowers visible to them that they're going to say, hey, look over there, and they're going to go check it out. If it's a smaller area, it might look nice for you, but they may not be able to see it. Group your plants together, a minimum of 5 to 7 plants of the same species, so it forms a big mound of the same color that's visible. Typically an area with good southeastern exposure, although I'll show you some plants that can go in other shady areas, and generally protected from winds so that they can forage without being blown away. All right, so I'm going to share some of our favorite native plants for pollinators in your yard. If it is called a ground cover, that means it's going to stay very low, about 6 to 8 inches. A low plant is about 1 to 2 feet tall, medium 2 to 4 feet tall, high 4 to 6 feet tall, and very high 6 to 12 feet tall. And then vines, you're going to need a support in order for them to climb. All right, here's my top 10 plants for about a 15 square foot area, and that's going to be Indian blanket, wine cups, gay feathers, liatris. Little blue stem is actually a grass, but it does bloom and provides food, and it also provides nesting material for pollinators. This is cheating, but I love all of the plants in the sunflower family. They provide so much food, a very rich nectar and pollen. Zinnias, coreopsis, echinacea, sunflowers, rudbeckia, yarrow, they're going to bloom for a long time. They're very drought resistant, and they provide a lot of bang for your buck. African blue basil will also bloom for a very long time, although it is not particularly edible. You can eat it, it just doesn't taste very good. Texas lantana, you're probably familiar with, and that blooms almost year-round in Houston, so it's a great source of food. Scarlet sage, specifically Salvia coccinea, is our native species. Coral bean and rattlesnake master, which is a really funny name, but it is such a cool plant. It's kind of a whimsical, spherical shapes, and the insects, the pollinators just love it. They're like lollipops for pollinators. Here's an example of a pollinator garden that I drew up for a client. This is a garden that will attract pollinators with drought and heat tolerant plants for our Houston area that bloom most of the year. So you are welcome to use this, print it out, take it to the nursery, and just make sure that they don't use pesticides. These are the top 10 plants I recommend for butterfly gardens. They actually provide food for the butterfly larvae or caterpillars. And so you can tell people that you have a butterfly nursery for butterfly babies. And if you tell that to a kid, oh my gosh, they'll be so excited and so engaged. So you can read through each of these. I will point out a couple of them. Native milkweeds, please choose Asclepias tuberosa or Asclepias viridis. Those are our native species. And notice that some of these are herbs that are edible for us, and they also provide a host plant for black swallowtail butterfly caterpillars. Did I skip one? Oh, here's the top 10 that are going to attract hummingbirds. And some of these are the same. This is a picture of a butterfly and not a hummingbird, but Turk's cap does attract hummingbirds as well. And make sure to get Drummond's Turk's cap because that's our native variety. If you have a shady area in your yard, there are some pollinator plants that will grow really well in the shade. Here's a list of those. And make sure when you choose a mist flower that you get blue mist flower instead of Greg's mist flower because the blue mist flower is our native one. And the symbol next to it means that each of these are actually edible or have been used in the past medicinally. So now let's talk about providing food year-round. I'm going to tell you some plants that are going to bloom in the spring, the summer, and the fall so that you can intermix them so that there's always food available. These are going to be spring blooming plants, the Texas bluebonnet, wine cup, primroses, indigo, the redbud tree, and the Mexican plum tree are going to be some of the first things to bloom in your garden. And so those pollinators that are just emerging after a long winter, they're going to have some food when they emerge. And here are plants that bloom in the summer. You'll see frog fruit here is a ground cover. It also works well in a container. This is actually a container of frog fruit that we had growing at the... Okay, getting back to our summer blooming plants. These are my favorite summer blooming plants, although there are lots more. These are just, this is just a shortened list that I want to provide for you because sometimes lists of plants can be overwhelming. Frog fruit not only grows in the garden, it can also grow in a container. This is actually a picture of a container garden at our old Urban Harvest offices, and you can see the frog fruit is spilling out, and it looks really beautiful. Um, Other low ones, prairie spiderwort, little bluestem, and inland sea oats, those are actually grasses, but they do provide food and nesting materials for pollinators. Gulf penstemon is specifically native to our area, that specific species. Rattlesnake master, again, some of these are repeat repeat plants because I like them so much, and they behave so well in a garden. The tree option is Carolina buckthorn, and a small tree is red mulberry. And a vine, coral honeysuckle is absolutely wonderful. Fall blooming plants. Um, right here, make sure that it is blue mistflower and not Greg's mistflower. Liatris gayfeather starts blooming in the summer, and it will bloom and be covered in pollinators. They love it. Also, goldenrod, which a lot of people are afraid to put in their yard because they think that it's ragweed, but goldenrod is not allergenic, and it's absolutely beautiful. This is a picture of it right here, along with some aromatic aster, and the yellow and purple combination is just wonderful. Gulf muley is a grass that actually blooms in the fall. Coneflower, specifically Rudbeckia texana and Rudbeckia hirta, are our native species. The fall obedient plant, buttonbush, grows very big, but pollinators love it. You do have to have a little bit of a big area for it. And Carolina jessamine is a vine that is just wonderful. Pollinators love it. All right, so here's some ideas of ways that I can get information out to other people. Um, we have with Urban Harvest organized community garden builds, and then I have taken that and done that in my own neighborhoods. If there's a green space, if there's a local school, I will simply organize a date and time, and sometimes we need to raise money. At this particular school, we actually worked with the PTA, and they set aside a couple $1,000s for us to build an 8-bed vegetable garden. So the cost for the bricks was about $1,700. The soil was a little under $400, and the labor was free. It was wonderful to see all those kids and parents and friends and family and neighbors come together, and we built that garden. We started at 8 a.m. and we were done by noon. The entire garden was built in 4 hours, and that entire pile of dirt was gone. Let's say you don't want to do something really big like that. You just want to get together with your friends. So something that I have done that's been really successful and a lot of fun is what I call a garden pop-up party. You will choose one of your friends' houses or your house, and they'll go buy a bunch of plants. I usually go with my friends and help them pick out the plants. And maybe now you have these lists of plants, you can print them out and take them and help your friends pick out the plants for their yard. Um, and then we set a date and all of us get together. We bring our own shovels, we bring our own gloves, we bring our kids, the kids run around, and we build a garden. And you know what? If you have food and beverages, people will come and they will have a good time. So the last thing I want to do is point you to some great resources that are available from Urban Harvest. The Urban Harvest School Gardening Guide is going to have information about growing vegetables unique to Houston. There's information about having a garden for insects and pollinators, and also the curriculum for teachers. So if you want to start a garden at a school and the teachers aren't really sure how to incorporate it, you can give them this guide and they'll get ideas for how to use the garden without adding any more to their curriculum because teachers are very busy. Um, and also my website, houstonnativebees.org. I have free activities and information about our local Houston native bees. And so you can learn about them and also teach others, hopefully, with the information that you have. Thank you so much for watching our webinar today and learning about our Houston pollinators and how you can help them. If you have any questions, please reach out to Urban Harvest. Their email is below, and we would love to hear from you. Thank you, and have a wonderful summer and happy gardening.